Okay, let's get right into it. The date is November 6th, 1930. It's 2 o'clock in the morning on a lonely country road, Hardingstone Lane in Northampton.
And critically, it's the morning after Guy Fawkes night. Two young men are walking home when they see a glow in the distance. They get closer and realize it's a car, a Morris Minor, and it's completely ablaze.
And not just a small fire, we're talking flames shooting 12 feet into the air.
Exactly. Inside, they see a shape, a body, a charred corpse that's been burned beyond any recognition.
But the car's registration plate, MU-1468, is somehow still legible. Police trace it to its owner, a man named Alfred Arthur Rouse. The thing is, Alfred Rouse is alive.
He's alive, and he was seen fleeing the area, so right away he's the prime suspect. The charge isn't some kind of tragic accident, it's murder. Murder by fire, designed to fake his own death.
And the evidence at the scene just immediately points to something sinister.
Yeah.
And calculated. The victim is found face down, sort of slumped across the front seats.
And nearby, a wooden mallet with 3 human hairs stuck to it. Then they look at the car itself, the petrol union joint. It's been deliberately loosened. By a full turn, the top of the carburetor is gone, removed.
This was sabotage.
This was sabotage. And worse, they find the victim's trousers are soaked in petrol. Later, spectroscopic analysis of the blood confirms the absolute horror of it all. The victim was alive when the fire started.
Unconscious, but still breathing.
Yes. Rouse's plan becomes sickeningly clear. Find a stranger, knock him unconscious, burn him alive in the car, and then vanish to collect a £1,000 insurance policy.
But who was this man, Alfred Rouse? Why would he go to such extreme lengths?
Well, on the surface, he's a 36-year-old commercial traveler, married for 16 years. But underneath that, it's a whole other story.
A secret life.
A secret life is putting it mildly. He had a bigamous marriage to a Helen Campbell, 2 children with her. He had another 2 illegitimate children with a 17-year-old servant, Nellie Tucker. And another woman, Ivy Jenkins, was pregnant, and he'd promised to marry her.
My God. So he's got 3 maintenance orders against him, draining his £500 annual salary. He's got car payments, a mortgage. He's giving his wife an allowance. He was facing total financial ruin.
Complete ruin. So the timing, November 5th, Guy Fawkes night, was deliberate. He hoped the fire would just be ignored, mistaken for a bonfire. But he made one fatal mistake.
He was seen.
He was seen fleeing by those 2 men, Bailey and Brown, at 2 a.m.
So the question that haunts this case to this day is, did Alfred Rouse murder an unknown man just to escape this impossible web he'd woven for himself? And maybe more importantly, who was the man he burned alive in that car?
Welcome to Whispers of Crime.
And this is a case where, the murderer was caught, the motive was clear, but the victim is just denied a name in death. He remains a complete cipher.
That's the core of it. We're looking at a crime driven by insurance fraud, yes, but also by this desperate need to just disappear from a life that was about to collapse on him.
Before we go any further, just a quick reminder to everyone listening.
Follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime.
So, Alfred Arthur Rouse. The sources paint this picture of a man who is just a complete contradiction. Successful salesman on one hand.
And on the other, a compulsive liar, a polygamist, and a man literally on the brink of financial collapse.
Let's talk about his background a bit, because there are hints of instability even from his youth.
There are. He was born in 1894, and he was raised mostly by an aunt. His mother was reportedly an actress who left the family, so there's some early disruption there. But he worked hard to build this facade of respectability. He was even a sacristan at his church when he was younger.
That facade seems to be the key to everything he did later. But then came the war. His defense used his WWI injury as a central part of their case, didn't they?
They did, and it was a legitimate severe injury. He sustained a serious head wound from shrapnel, and his medical records from 1916 onwards are quite telling. They note a defective memory and neurosis.
What kind of symptoms did he have?
He complained of dizziness, chronic insomnia. There were reports of inappropriate emotional responses, like laughing uncontrollably at very serious moments. The defense later tried to frame his crime as the result of this shell shock, implying he wasn't fully in control, that his judgment was impaired.
But the prosecution, they didn't buy that for a second.
Not at all. They argued that the sheer level of planning, the calculation involved in the murder, completely contradicted the idea of an impulsive act by a mentally damaged man.
He eventually recovered enough to become a commercial traveler. And that job, being on the road constantly, seems to be what enabled his entire secret life.
It was the perfect cover. It gave him mobility, anonymity. He could travel the country, meet new people, and operate miles away from his home and his legal wife, Lily May. And he exploited that freedom to the fullest.
He had a type, didn't he?
He did. He would pose as a single, quite wealthy, London-based businessman, and he specifically targeted women from, well, vulnerable backgrounds. He'd offer them the promise of marriage, of a better life.
We know this wasn't a one-off thing. There's an incident from 1920.
A very disturbing one. He impregnated a 14-year-old girl in Edinburgh and then just abandoned her. So the pattern of deception, of preying on vulnerability, was established very early on.
It's just staggering, the scale of the life he was juggling. Let's really lay it out.
Okay. First, you have his legal wife, Lily May Watkins. They married in 1914. Now, by all accounts, she knew he was unfaithful, but she likely had no idea of the true extent of it.
And he was with her. I mean, living with her while all this was going on.
Yes. Then there's Helen Campbell. He went through a big marriage ceremony with her. They had 2 children together. She believes she was his lawful wife.
Then Nellie Tucker.
Nellie Tucker was a domestic servant in Hendon. He had 2 children with her as well, and she had successfully taken him to court to get maintenance orders against him.
And he saw her. He actually met with Nellie Tucker just hours before he committed the murder.
He did. And if that wasn't enough, there was Ivy Jenkins. She was pregnant with his child, and he had promised to marry her too. His legal wife, Lily May, had actually found a photograph of Ivy in his pocket. The whole thing was about to unravel.
So let's talk about the money, because this is really where it all comes crashing down. His salary was around £500 a year. In 1930, how bad was his financial situation?
It was catastrophic. I mean, £500 was a decent lower middle class salary. A working class man might earn £150, maybe £200, but Rouse's expenses were just astronomical.
Let's break them down.
Okay, so you have his car payments, £1, 12 shillings a week, his mortgage, £1, 7 and 6 pence a week, and the allowance for his legal wife, Lily May, £2, 10 shillings a week.
That's already more than £5 a week right there. Over half his salary is gone on just his primary life.
Exactly. Now, on top of that, you have to add the court-ordered maintenance for Nellie Tucker's children, plus whatever he was paying to support Helen Campbell and her 2 children. And on top of that, supporting the pregnant Ivy Jenkins, he was essentially running 3, maybe 4 separate households on one income.
He wasn't just in debt, he was completely insolvent.
He was facing a total public collapse, humiliation, debtor's prison. It was all closing in.
So the murder wasn't just a get-rich-quick scheme. That £1,000 from the insurance policy, it was his escape fund.
That's it, precisely. The policy on the Morris Minor covered the driver or passenger. By faking his death, he planned for the body to be identified as his. His wife would claim the money, and he would just disappear. Start over somewhere new, free from the name Alfred Rouse and all the debts and dependents attached to it. The pressure was the detonator, and the murder was the escape plan.
It just takes us from that sense of desperation to the actual cold-blooded nature of the crime itself. He later confessed he'd been thinking about this since the summer. This wasn't a snap decision.
Not at all. This was a strategy, and a key part of that strategy was the timing.
November 5th, Guy Fawkes Night.
It's just so deliberate. All across the country, there are fireworks, bonfires. He figured the sight of a car burning on a dark lane would probably be dismissed, at least at first, as just another bonfire.
It's just incredibly cynical.
Yeah.
And the selection of the victim was maybe the most ruthless part of all.
It really was. It was all about anonymity. In his confession, he said he was specifically looking for a down and out. He found a man near the Swan and Pyramid pub in Whetstone.
What were his criteria for a victim?
Simple and brutal. The man was looking for work. He appeared to have no family or connections, and he was, in Rouse's own chilling words, the sort of man nobody would miss.
The sort of man nobody would miss. That says everything about how he saw this other human being, not as a person, but as a tool.
The prop. An obstacle to be removed and a body to be used. He offered the man a lift to the Midlands, to Leicester, pretending he could help him find a job. On the night of November 5th, he picked him up, and during that drive, he made sure the man drank.
He gave him whiskey.
Yes, he bought whiskey specifically to get him drunk, to make him more compliant, less able to fight back when the time came.
So he drives this man, who is probably heavily intoxicated, maybe even passed out, away from London towards Northampton. And he chooses this specific spot, Hardingstone Lane.
It was chosen for its isolation. It's a quiet side road, about 159 yards off the main highway. Perfect for what he had in mind. He pulled the car over, saying he needed to relieve himself. That was the pretext.
And that's when he attacked. He detailed it in the confession.
He did. He said he grabbed the man by the throat with his right hand, pushing his head back against the seat. The man just made a gurgling sound. There was almost no resistance, probably because of the alcohol.
He strangled him into unconsciousness.
Yes. And he noted a very specific detail. He said the victim had a bald patch on the crown of his head. It shows he took a moment to look at the man, to observe him, before he did the next part.
Which confirms the forensics. The victim was alive, just unconscious, when the fire started. This makes it murder, not just disposing of a body. And then came the mechanical sabotage.
This is where his knowledge of cars comes in. His actions were very specific, all designed to create an instant, uncontrollable fire. First, he loosens that petrol union joint by one full turn and removes the top of the carburetor.
That would just flood the engine with petrol.
It would guarantee a catastrophic failure of the fuel system the moment it ignited. He wasn't just hoping for a fire, he was engineering an explosion.
You wanted an inferno.
An inferno. He then got the petrol can from the back of the car and just methodically doused the unconscious man and the car's interior with fuel. He put the can back, laid a trail of petrol away from the car.
And lit it from a distance.
Lit it from a distance. The flames raced back to the car and it just went up instantly. Those 12-foot flames the witnesses saw.
All that careful, meticulous, brutal planning. And it was all ruined in an instant by just sheer bad luck.
The worst possible luck for him. The arrival of Alfred Brown and William Bailey, they were peasants just walking home from a dance. At exactly 2 a.m., they turn into Hardingstone Lane.
And before they even really register what the blaze is, they see him.
They see Rouse. He's coming out of a ditch or a hedge near the corner of the lane. He's hatless. He's out of breath.
And he's carrying something.
He's carrying his attaché case, the one thing he couldn't leave behind. He later said he didn't trust the victim with it. It had all his personal papers. That case is the detail that betrays him.
The witnesses see him, and he tries to act casual, but it just comes across as panicked.
Completely. As they get closer, one of them, Bailey, asks his cousin, "What is the blaze?" And Rouse, who is sort of retreating away from them, just blurts out this clumsy, desperate lie. He says, "It looks as if someone has had a bonfire."
A bonfire. With a car in the middle of it. That lie, that panic, it must have made him seem incredibly guilty.
It did, and he knew he'd been seen. He gets to the main road, and for a second he hesitates. He starts to walk towards Northampton, then turns around and heads back towards London. The entire escape plan, his new life, it all just evaporated in that single moment. He knew he was a wanted man.
When the police, PC copping, arrived, the scene must have been just horrific.
Intense heat, total destruction. The fire was so strong, but they managed to get it out in a few minutes with water. And that's when the true aftermath was revealed.
The position of the body was the first big clue, wasn't it? That this wasn't right.
It was. The car was just a burnt-out shell. The body was lying face down, with the head on the driver's seat and the torso across the passenger seat. But the most important detail was the right leg. It was extended straight out of the car, past the door frame, sticking out about 8 inches.
What does that suggest?
Well, either he was forced into that position or, and this is the more haunting possibility, he was trying to get out before the flames completely consumed him.
And then, of course, they find the mallet.
The mallet. 14 yards in front of the car, just sitting on the grass verge. And the officer who found it, PC Valentine, noted that the grass underneath it was fresh, it hadn't been there long, and most damning of all,
The hairs.
3 human hairs, light-colored, wedged into the head of the mallet. This physical evidence supported the idea that the victim was struck, rendered unconscious, before the fire.
We should probably mention here that the initial police work wasn't perfect. It came up later in the appeal.
That's right. For all the forensic brilliance that came later, there were some early missteps. Critically, the police didn't take any photographs of the scene before things were moved.
And they moved the car, didn't they?
Yes. PC Copping had the car moved off the road onto the verge a few hours later at about 4:45 a.m. to clear the lane. It's understandable, but it compromised the scene. The defense later tried to use that to argue that the evidence, like the mallet, might not have been found exactly where the police claimed. It was a long shot, but it was a flaw in the investigation.
So while the police are at the scene, Rouse is in full flight. 44 hours of frantic running and lying.
His first move is to get back to London. He hitchhikes, gets home around 6:20 in the morning. He's only there long enough to change his clothes and grab some cash. Then he gets a train to Glamorganshire.
To Ivy Jenkins, the pregnant woman he'd promised to marry. Why there?
It was probably the furthest, safest place he could think to go. He needed to lie low, and more importantly, he needed to start building his alibi.
And what was the story he told her?
He told her the car had been stolen from him in Northamptonshire. He said he'd already reported the theft to the police and the insurance company. He's trying to paint himself as the victim here.
A story that fell apart pretty quickly.
The very next morning, Ivy Jenkins's sister shows him a newspaper, and there's a picture of his burnt-out car with the story speculating that the body inside might be the owner, Alfred Rouse.
What did he do?
He doubled down on the lie. He denied it was his car, said it was just the same make and model. Then he tried to sound helpful, proactive. He announced he was going to go to Scotland Yard to sort it all out.
But it was too late. The sisters were suspicious.
Highly suspicious. They contacted the local police, who in turn alerted the Met in London. The net was closing.
And he was finally arrested at the Hammersmith coach terminal.
That's right. On the evening of November 7th, Detective Sergeant Skelly made the arrest. Rouse didn't resist. In fact, he seemed almost relieved. He said, "Very well. I am glad it is all over. I was going to Scotland Yard about it. I am responsible."
He said, "I am responsible."
Ah.
That sounds like a confession right there.
It does, but when they got him back for a formal statement, he constructed this incredibly elaborate new lie.
This is the story about the careless hitchhiker.
Exactly. He claimed he'd picked up a man, stopped because he felt sick, and asked the man to pour some petrol into the tank from the can in the back. He said he gave the man a cigar, and then, when he looked back, the car was on fire. He was blaming the whole thing on this anonymous man smoking while handling petrol.
And his reason for running?
Pure panic. He claimed he was afraid he'd be blamed for the man's accidental death. It was a clever story, but then he completely undermined himself.
How?
After he finished his formal statement, he just started talking. He asked the inspector about the inquest, and then, completely unprompted, he offered this incredible insight into his life. He said, "My wife was too good to me. I like women who make a fuss of me. I know several, but it is an expensive game. My harem takes me to several places."
My harem. He basically handed the prosecution their motive on a silver platter. He admitted his lifestyle was expensive, unsustainable. It proved the need to escape, even if he didn't admit to the murder itself.
Precisely. So the police had a suspect who fled, who lied, who was seen at the scene, and who had just confessed to the motive. All they needed now was the science to prove his accident story was impossible.
And that's where this case really becomes a landmark in legal history. It's the moment forensic science takes center stage in a British courtroom.
It really is. The prosecution, led by the famous Norman Burkitt, knew their case rested on proving this was deliberate design, not a tragic mistake, and they brought in two absolute titans of their fields to do it.
Sir Bernard Spilsbury, the pathologist.
And Colonel Cuthbert Buckle, a brilliant vehicular engineer.
Let's start with Buckle. Rouse's whole defense was that the fire could have been an accident, that heat or vibration might have caused a fuel leak. How did Buckle just completely demolish that idea?
Buckle's testimony was devastatingly precise. He examined the wreckage and focused on that petrol union joint. He conducted tests and proved that there was no way it could have loosened naturally from heat or vibration. He testified that it had been forcibly loosened by exactly one full turn.
Which requires a human hand and intent.
And mechanical knowledge. He explained that loosening it by that specific amount was the perfect way to make sure petrol would flood the engine compartment and create the biggest possible fire.
So the car wasn't a victim of the fire. It was the weapon.
It was the weapon. And then you add the fact that the carburetor top was removed.
Wrong.
It was just conclusive proof of mechanical sabotage. This wasn't circumstantial anymore. This was hard, physical evidence of premeditation right there in the twisted metal.
And the prosecutor, Burkitt, used this in a very, very dramatic way during the trial.
Oh, it's one of the most famous moments in British courtroom history. Rouse is on the witness stand, sticking to his story about the hitchhiker, and Burkitt walks over to him and he places the actual burnt carburetor wreckage into Rouse's hands.
Right there in front of the jury.
In front of everyone. He forced Rouse to physically hold the evidence of his crime, and by all accounts, Rouse just fell apart. He went pale. He started stammering. He had no explanation. You could just see his story dissolving in his hands. It had a massive impact on the jury.
So that's the proof of the design. But the proof of the murder itself, the fact that the victim was burned alive, that came from Sir Bernard Spilsbury.
Yes, and what Spilsbury and his colleague Dr. Eric Shaw accomplished was truly groundbreaking for the 1930s. The body was terribly burned, but they managed to get viable fluid and tissue samples. And the key was what they did with them: spectroscopic testing.
What exactly is that, and why was it so important here?
Well, spectroscopic analysis essentially measures how different chemical compounds absorb light. They used it to identify the gases that had been absorbed into the victim's blood, and what they found were large amounts of carbon monoxide.
Carbon monoxide from the fire.
On the fire, they also found carbon-stained mucus in the bronchi, the air passages to the lungs.
So if the victim had already been dead, killed by the mallet or strangulation, he wouldn't have inhaled anything.
Precisely. His heart wouldn't have been pumping, his lungs wouldn't have been working. The presence of carbon monoxide was absolute proof that the victim's circulatory and respiratory systems were still functioning as he was being burned. Spilsbury concluded he was alive and breathing, even if unconscious, for up to 30 seconds after the fire started.
So the official cause of death was shock from the burns, not the blow to the head.
Exactly. And that distinction was everything. It proved Rouse's intent was not just to kill a man and dispose of the body, but to burn a living man to death to make the scene look like an accident.
And there was one final forensic piece about the petrol on the clothes.
Yes, the defense tried to say petrol could have spilled during the supposed refueling accident. But Spilsbury found an unburned piece of the man's trousers from the fork section, and he testified that this piece of cloth was completely saturated with liquid petrol. It wasn't a splash, it was a thorough dousing. It matched Rouse's confessed method perfectly.
Now, Spilsbury himself is a complicated figure in the history of forensics.
He is. He was a legend in his time. Juries were completely captivated by him, but later analysis has shown he could be incredibly dogmatic, inflexible, and he insisted on working alone. There's a sense that his powerful reputation sometimes took the place of objective proof, and it may have led to miscarriages of justice in other cases.
But not this one. In the Rouse case, his science was solid.
It was. The carbon monoxide evidence, combined with Buckle's engineering analysis, set a whole new standard for what could be proven in court. Rouse wasn't just convicted by what witnesses saw, he was convicted by the irrefutable testimony of science.
The trial started in late January 1931. With that weight of scientific evidence, the defense really had an uphill battle.
An impossible battle, really. Their main strategy was to attack the science, bringing in their own engineer to say the fire could have been an accident, but Buckle's evidence was just too strong. And then they leaned heavily on the WWI head injury.
The shell shock defense.
The shell shock defense. They argued he lacked the mental capacity for this kind of cold, calculated crime. But the prosecution just pointed to the evidence, the planning, the choice of date, the mechanical tampering. It all screamed lucid calculation.
And the jury agreed.
Overwhelmingly. They deliberated for just 15 minutes. That's how clear-cut the evidence was. They saw no reasonable doubt. Alfred Arthur Rouse was found guilty on January 31st, 1931.
His execution was carried out pretty quickly on March 10th, and his final hours were, well, they were as strange and complicated as his life.
He was apparently very restless the night before, but on the morning of the execution, he seemed calm, resigned. Witnesses did note that as his arms were being pinioned for the walk to the gallows, he suddenly swayed and almost collapsed.
But it's the story of his final farewells that is just so incredible. It really shows the human wreckage he left behind.
It's a truly remarkable incident. His legal wife, Lily Mae Watkins, was there for her final visit with him, and her visit was interrupted, cut short.
Why? For what possible reason?
So that Rouse could say his goodbyes to Helen Campbell, his bigamous wife.
I can't even imagine. They made his legal wife wait so he could see the other woman.
They did, and Lily Mae's reaction afterwards is just... It's a testament to her character. She was obviously distraught, she collapsed, but she then promised Rouse that she would be friendly with Helen Campbell and that she would help care for Helen's son.
In the face of that ultimate betrayal, she chose compassion.
She did. She recognized that Helen and her children were victims in all of this too, just another part of the tragedy he had created.
Now, Rouse never confessed in court or officially to the authorities, but the full story came out almost immediately after he died.
Yes. The very next day, March 11th, the Daily Sketch newspaper published his full written confession. He had sold the story, and it confirmed everything the prosecution had argued. The planning, picking up the down and out, the strangulation, tampering with the car, dousing it in petrol, everything.
The timing of that is just so cynical. Why wait until after he's dead to tell the truth?
It's a fascinating psychological question, isn't it? I think it was about control. By withholding the full story, he maintained some power during the trial. Confessing would have just been handing the prosecution a conviction. By selling it to a newspaper for post-mortem publication, he got to tell his story on his own terms one last time when there was nothing more the law could do to him. It was his final act of manipulation.
And the whole reason for this horrific crime, the £1,000 insurance payout?
The claim was denied. The whole thing was for nothing. He committed this awful, calculated murder, erased a man's identity, and went to the gallows for a prize he never even came close to getting. It was a complete and utter failure.
Which brings us to the one person in this story who has never had a voice. The man in the car. It's a great tragedy of this case. Alfred Rouse wanted to erase his own identity, but he only succeeded in erasing his victims.
And that's the ghost that has haunted this case for almost a century, the unknown man.
What do we actually know about him from that original investigation?
Very little. Based on the remains, experts thought he was a young man, maybe around 30. His build suggested he might have been a miner or someone who did manual labor. But that's it. No missing persons reports from that time ever matched up. His entire life story, his name, his family, it all just vanished in the fire.
He was buried under a cross that just said he was unidentified, a symbol of that anonymity.
Right. And it stayed that way for decades. The fact that the killer is so infamous, while the victim is a complete blank, is the central injustice that keeps this case alive.
So when did modern science finally get a chance to try and give this man his name back?
That effort really started to gain momentum around 2012. A team of forensic scientists from the University of Leicester and Northumbria University began working with the police to try and get a DNA profile.
But what could they possibly use? The samples would be nearly a century old.
This is the amazing part. They managed to find the original microscope slides from Spilsbury's 1930 autopsy. The tissue samples have been preserved on them for over 80 years.
And they could get DNA from that.
It's incredibly difficult. The chances are usually very low. But they succeeded. They were able to extract a full, single male mitochondrial DNA profile, an mtDNA profile.
For those of us who aren't scientists, what does that mean?
So mitochondrial DNA is passed down from a mother to all her children. It doesn't give you the paternal line, but it gives you a clear maternal lineage to trace. And crucially, it's much more durable than other types of DNA, so it's more likely to survive in old, degraded samples like these.
So it's enough for a comparison. And there was an early hope, a family who thought the victim might be their missing relative.
Yes. The family of a man named William Briggs, who went missing in 1930. The circumstances seemed to fit, and they had hoped for decades that this might be him. But when they compared the DNA, it wasn't a match. William Briggs was definitively ruled out.
That must have been heartbreaking for them.
It was a huge setback, but it was also a necessary step in narrowing the search.
So where does the investigation stand today?
It's still an active cold case. That mtDNA profile is held in databases, and it's constantly being compared against new entries, both from police sources and from public genealogy websites. So far, they've ruled out at least 9 different families who had relatives disappear around that time. They are still waiting for that one crucial link.
It's just incredible to think about. This crime from 1930 is now dependent on the cutting edge of genetic genealogy.
It really is. The ultimate irony is that Rouse's identity is fixed forever in history because of the science that convicted him. But the identity of his victim, the man whose anonymity was supposed to be Rouse's ticket to freedom, is the one thing science is still fighting to recover.
You look at this case and you see this stark contrast. On one hand, you have the cold, mechanical planning of the murder, and on the other, you have the absolutely chaotic, pathetic desperation of Rouse's life.
He was a man drowning, and instead of trying to swim, he decided to pull someone else under with him. The whole thing was this grand theatrical plan. He thought he could use Guy Fawkes Night, use the anonymity of a homeless man, and just stage his own exit. But he wasn't as clever as he thought.
The 2 witnesses and the science. That's what brought him down.
The witnesses and the science. Buckle's analysis of that loosened joint and Spilsbury's proof of the carbon monoxide. His story just couldn't stand up to the facts. His stage collapsed around him.
And after all this time, nearly a century, the only thing missing is a name.
That's the final chilling thought here, isn't it? The only thing preventing final closure in this case is a single DNA match. The genetic profile of the unknown man of Hardingstone Lane exists, it's preserved. It's just waiting to be linked to a descendant, a great niece or nephew perhaps, who uploads their DNA to a public database. Somewhere out there, he is still waiting for his name.
Don't forget to follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime.
Like, share this episode with others who might have information about this case and help. Also, comment your suggestions below. Drop your positive review and rating. Remember to check out other UK historical court case we have previously released.
And we want to end with this. If you, or anyone you know, has a family story about a male relative who disappeared in the Northamptonshire area of the UK around November 1930, whose fate was never known,
We would urge you to consider contacting the relevant police or forensic teams. Your family's history, a story passed down through generations, could hold the final piece of the puzzle that finally gives this victim his name back.